In the year when Ryan was at his poorest, I dumped him and went abroad to study. Later, he achieved great success and spent a fortune to bid for a gemstone necklace for his girlfriend. She smiled and stretched out her hand towards me. I heard that Ryan also gave jewelry to Senior's sister in the past. It's a pity that Senior's sister didn't like it. I lowered my head and covered my wrist, with my eyes feeling sour. It's great to be rich. The one he gave me back then was so small that it was almost invisible. Serena must be regretting it so much now. The venue of the auction wasn't large. And Ivy's and my conversation reached the ears of the people around us word for word. The whispers and discussions of the people around came one after another. There was ridicule and mockery. She disliked the poor and favored the rich and dumped Ryan back then. She wanted to go abroad and marry a rich man. But now she's slinking back. What is she doing here today? Could it be that she wants to rekindle an old relationship? She might want to. But unfortunately, President Ryan already has a girlfriend. Maybe she's willing to be the mistress? Everyone knew that Ryan had a little girlfriend whom he held dear in his heart. However, she was so well protected by him that few people had seen her true appearance. Now that I think about it, that person should be Ivy, the belle of the computer science department at University A. Ryan's direct junior schoolmate. When she was still at school, she liked Ryan and was also full of hostility towards me. But now, the person standing beside Ryan. It's her. Not me. Across the crowd, Ryan's handsome brows furrowed slightly. This was the first time we met after breaking up 5 years ago. The poor young man who couldn't even afford a down jacket in the cold winter has now become a new upstart in the business world. He stood tall and straight, exuding an air of calmness and arrogance of a superior in every gesture. The look in his eyes when he looked at me was full of indifference. Those old things in the past. I've long forgotten about them. His tone was so calm as if he was talking about someone else's affairs. Only then did everyone fall silent and subtly changed the topic. Long forgotten. Although I had already prepared myself, a fine pain still welled up in my chest. I picked up a glass of brandy and walked towards the terrace alone. In September, there was already a hint of coolness in the night. The raindrops fell on the swimming pool, creating white ripples. In a trance, I remembered that snowy night again. The young man was wearing a thin cotton coat and dialed that phone number that was destined and not to be answered over and over again in the cold snow. My thoughts were interrupted by sudden footsteps. Ryan stood at the stairway, looking at me expressionlessly. When I secretly ate ice cream during my menstrual period in the past, he would always look at me like this. His expression told me that he was angry. I would play tricks and hug his waist, insisting that he kiss me on the campus where people were coming and going. Ryan had no choice but to soften his voice with a blushing face and say, "Don't do this next time." There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. I didn't think Ryan came to find me. Or rather, even if he came to find me, it wouldn't be anything good. After all, the breakup back then was too tragic. He had always been proud and aloof, but I trampled on his dignity. If I were him, I wouldn't be able to let it go either. Probably because there were too many people in the venue. He had to come out to find some peace and quiet. He had always liked being quiet and didn't talk much. Most of the time when we were together, I was the one talking. And he was just responsible for listening and handing me water. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest. I bit my lower lip and walked past him with my head down. The next second, my wrist was firmly grabbed. Ryan's voice was stubborn and hoarse, and his eyes stared straight at my wrist. "This bracelet, didn't you throw it away?" I did throw it away. In front of Ryan. I threw it far into the snow. Then, outside. In the dark night, I used a flashlight and searched through the snow while crying. I had imagined the scene of our reunion many times. But after thousands of words turned around in my mind, the face that finally emerged was Ivy's. Perhaps this was the best ending for us now. I forcefully broke free from his grasp on my wrist and raised the wedding ring on my ring finger. This one was given to me by my husband. I'm married. The man's face lost all its color in an instant. The auction continued. Ryan sat in the middle of the first row, exuding a gloomy aura. The air conditioning in the hall was very strong. But I saw that the hairline behind his ear was slightly sweaty. glistening with tiny lights under the light. The auctioneer was still performing hard on the stage. And next item up for auction is the latest painting by the artist, Sicilian Missing. The moment the canvas was uncovered, I stood up from my chair. The scraping sound of metal and wooden floors was particularly harsh. Under the impatient gazes of everyone, I eagerly ran towards the backstage. The auction of the work was suspended. To show my apology, I promised the manager to meet with the potential buyer. Along the way, having fulfilled my obsession, Alan kept telling me how generous the price offered by the other party was. Trying to persuade me one last time, I firmly refused. In the room, the unknown collector had his back to us and stared motionlessly at the painting on the wall. A woman was kneeling in the dark, hugging a swaddling baby whose face couldn't be seen clearly. This painting was only finished the night before I returned to the country and had always been placed at the bottom of my suitcase. It wasn't that I didn't like it, but every time I saw it, my heart couldn't help but twitch. I held back the stabbing pain in my heart and spoke to the man whose back alone indicated that he was wealthy and noble. "Sir, this painting is not for sale. I accidentally mixed it with the works for the exhibition." The man's body suddenly froze, and he turned around slowly as if in slow motion. The familiar face was gradually revealed under the light. "Ryan, if you like, you can take a look at my other works." The words that I didn't say got stuck in my throat. In the VIP room, Ryan's eyes suddenly shrank. "Serena, I really like this painting. Name your price." It sounded like he wasn't willing to back down. "Serena, name the price." A surge of tears suddenly welled up. "Serena, it was clearly my own choice. Wasn't it? He's doing well now. In the 5 years when I was absent, he finally grew into the person he should be. Isn't that enough?" I held back my tears and spoke in the identity of a stranger. "Cooperating with Ryan, sir. The creation of this painting is completely based on my personal experience. And it is for—" I paused and used all my strength to suppress my trembling voice, "to pay tribute to my dead child." A clear cracking sound rang out. The delicate goblet slipped from the man's hand. I picked up the painting and fled in a hurry with my face covered. The name of this painting is Whirlpool. The past is like a black whirlpool. And I am a drowning person on the verge of death, with nowhere to escape. The first time I met Ryan, I knew he was my kind of person. Leo was still a cynical young master at that time. And he almost couldn't straighten up from laughing when he heard this. "Serena, I know he's handsome. But you don't have to tell such an obvious lie. A pair of your shoes is enough for his annual living expenses. How can you be of the same kind as him?" I finished the wine in my glass in one gulp and turned around to go out. His mother who died early. His father who committed domestic violence. And the broken him. Why isn't he of the same kind as me? At the entrance of the venue, I composed myself and carefully wrapped the painting with a shawl. In the rain curtain, a black Bentley stopped in front of me. Ryan got out of the driver's seat with a sullen face and pulled me into the car without asking. It was very quiet in the car. Ryan's slender fingers unconsciously rubbed on the steering wheel. This was his subconscious action when he was fidgety. "Address. I've called a car. I can go back by myself." Ryan turned his head to look at me and leaned closer little by little, until I could see my tiny reflection in his pupils. His warm breath fell on my neck, causing a tingling sensation. "What's wrong? Are you afraid I'll eat you?" His hand had somehow already rested on the car window beside my ear, trapping me in his aura. I instinctively licked my lips and saw Ryan's eyes darken. With suppressed pain and longing, I closed my eyes. It was like reminding him. And also like reminding myself, "Ryan, I'm already married." The man's movements froze in place. After a long silence, I heard his deep voice ring out, as if he had made a certain decision. "So what?" "What? Nothing." In a moment of distraction, Ryan had already returned to his original dignity and indifference. As if that sentence just now was just my illusion. But I didn't dare to ask again. Ryan really just drove me home. Even when I wanted to thank him, he left as if running away. He only left me with the taillight of the car. As soon as I got back to my room, Leo's call came through. After Leo's family's downfall, he started a small company on his own. The reason I came back to the country this time was, first, to sell some paintings to Leo to raise funds for his business startup. Second, to go through the divorce procedures. The Gushen group has gone bankrupt, and no one will force us to continue this arranged marriage. The voice on the other end of the phone was a bit excited. I heard that you met Ryan today. How was it? Did you explain things clearly to him? I didn't turn on the light and looked at the traffic in the city through the window. Does he have a girlfriend? Leo's tone paused, and he said cautiously, Serena. Are you okay? It's okay. It's all in the past. The Ryan who would purse his lips and be jealous when he saw I received love letters. The Ryan who worked part-time day and night just to buy me a birthday gift. The Ryan who said with red eyes that we could break up first after being framed for academic fraud. It's all in the past. Time has passed. And things and people have changed. I hung up the phone and finally couldn't help but collapse on the carpet and burst into tears. When I got up the next day, my eyes were swollen like walnuts. Fortunately, having fulfilled Lee, there weren't many people at the Civil Affairs Bureau today. Leo and I quickly completed the divorce procedures. Across the street, a familiar Bentley parked by the roadside. The car window rolled down, revealing Ryan's extremely handsome face. He was originally very good-looking. And today he was also wearing a pair of golden half-rimmed glasses. Paired with a silver-gray suit, he looked even more enchanting. He looked as if he had dressed up carefully. And he even had his hair done. You know. He used to hate all these fancy things the most. I was stunned for a moment. But I quickly remembered that he should be here to get a marriage certificate. No wonder he bid for that necklace yesterday. That should be a wedding gift for Ivy. He was still like this. When he loved someone, he wanted to give her the best. Our eyes met, and I reluctantly forced a congratulatory smile. Ryan frowned slightly and rolled up the car window. My smile hadn't had time to fade away, and it was reflected on the black glass, paired with my eyes swollen like walnuts. Extremely embarrassed. After going through the formalities, Leo and I went to Nanshan Cemetery. On the day the Serena family was investigated, Victor, with his illegitimate daughter, tried to flee abroad. I gave him a paternity test certificate. And then, at the moment he was about to take action, I pressed the record button. He only told me that my mother died during childbirth. But he never mentioned that before the difficult childbirth, she had witnessed her husband accompanying another pregnant woman for a prenatal checkup with her own eyes. My so-called half-sister is only 3 months younger than me. Leaning against the cold tombstone, I chattered on and on. Mom, I was afraid to come and see you before. Have you ever blamed me? Mom, I'm already 27 years old this year. Older than you were when you passed away. Mom, I have someone I love very, very much. But we've missed each other for many years. Mom, I'm leaving here soon. But don't worry. I'll come back to see you every year. As the night grew darker, a cold wind suddenly blew up. The first snow of the year fell in City A. I raised my hand and touched my cheek. It was all wet. I dragged my tired body home and silently calculated the things I wanted to take with me. City A holds too many unpleasant memories for me. I plan to leave here and go to a place where it never snows to start my new life. Around the corner, I could vaguely hear some strange noises coming from upstairs. In the dark corridor, a person was standing there. Ryan? The man's head was leaning against the wall, and he looked drunk. Hearing my voice, he looked up and stared at me steadily. His eyes red-rimmed. Serena, why are you crying? Do you like him that much? Today is the exact 5th anniversary of Ava's death. 5 years ago today. I was lying in the hospital, with a trace of naive fantasy amidst my despair. I thought Ryan and I could elope, go to the south, go to Hong Kong, or even go abroad. Hide in a place where the Serena family and the Leo family couldn't find us and live a peaceful life for the rest of our lives. That's when Leo appeared. The moonlight shone on his face through the window of the hospital bed, illuminating his pale lips and his eyes so swollen that he could barely open them. He said, Serena, Iva is dead. I should have died with her. But she still has a younger brother and a grandmother. She said she wanted to earn money for her younger brother to go to school and for her grandmother to see a doctor, so that her parents in heaven could rest in peace. She's dead, but I'm still alive. Serena. Why am I still alive? Leo slumped on the ground. In pain and despair. Serena. Break up with Ryan. Don't be like me. Not even having the chance to be hated. The voice-activated light in the stairwell flickered on and off, casting light on Ryan's slightly tipsy profile. He leaned against the wall, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. 2 buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing his delicate collarbone. All the grudges and grievances had been settled. It's just that between Ryan and me, we still owe each other a decent goodbye. I looked at the man I had loved for many years, holding back my tears and slowly saying, I had my own difficulties in what happened back then. You were framed, ostracized, and your investments were revoked, all because of me. It was indeed my fault to break up like that. But I really didn't have a better solution. Ryan. If possible, let's say goodbye properly this time. His originally blurred eyes suddenly became clear, and his body stiffened suddenly. Goodbye? Where are you going again? London. I clenched the key in my hand. I have a studio there. Why do you want to leave all of a sudden? Ryan interrupted me, his voice tinged with suppressed anger. I lowered my eyes, not daring to meet his gaze. There's nothing left here worth lingering for. Ryan suddenly laughed. The laughter echoed in the empty stairwell, carrying a hint of self-mockery and desolation. Nothing worth lingering for? Then what about these 5 years? I've been desperately climbing out. Just 4. My back pressed against the cold wall, and my heart was pounding like thunder. The smell of brandy and cedar on him surrounded me, almost making me suffocate. Do you know? Ryan's voice was hoarse, and his breath was rapid and unsteady. His hands tightly grasped the hem of my clothes, like a drowning person clutching at the last piece of driftwood. Every day I think, if I had been stronger back then, would I not have lost you? I felt my eyes burning, but I stubbornly turned my face away. It's all in the past. I can't get over it. Ryan suddenly grabbed my wrist. His hot breath sprayed on my neck. I could feel his hands shaking, but he held me even tighter. I struggled hard, trying to escape. But then I heard the man's pleading murmur in my ear, Serena. Don't leave. I have a lot of money now. I froze in place, my body trembling uncontrollably, as if I had returned to that snowy night 5 years ago. After the last exam ended, my roommates gradually started packing their luggage and going home. Wendy was the last one to leave. Before going out, she hesitated and asked me, Serena, are you really not going downstairs? It's so cold, and Ryan has been waiting downstairs for 2 hours. I'm not going. If it gets any later, he'll naturally go back. Wendy wanted to persuade me further, but seeing my indifferent expression, she gave up. I was left alone in the dormitory. I washed my face and confirmed several times in the mirror that there were no signs of crying on my face. When he saw me coming, the young man's eyes clearly lit up, and he carefully observed my expression. Serena, did I do something wrong recently that made you angry? After saying that, he took out a box as if showing off a treasure. Look. This is the bracelet you said you liked last time. I wanted to buy it before your birthday, so I took on a few more projects these days. The young man's tone was even gentler than usual, as if he had sensed the uneasy atmosphere in advance. He was begging for my mercy. I swiped the bracelet to the ground. No need. I don't like this anymore. You don't need to come to see me either. I've applied for an exchange program abroad and don't want to be in a long-distance relationship. Ryan froze in place, his eyes dazed. He didn't know about the exchange program abroad before. After a while, he came back to his senses. Serena, where are you going? I can go with you. I held back my sobs and spoke word by word. Ryan, do I have to say it explicitly? People like you can't even afford a plane ticket abroad. You can only buy some cheap jewelry, just like yourself. Ryan looked at me in disbelief. He couldn't understand why the person who had said she wanted to be with him forever just a few days ago had suddenly changed. Blame me. Ryan. If it can make you feel better, I'm willing to accept any words. But he didn't say anything more. He just clenched his fists helplessly and forced a flattering smile on his face. Serena, one of my projects has been selected by the company. Can you wait for me a little longer? I'll go and see you every month then. I closed my eyes and forcefully shook off his hands. Stop daydreaming. Starting a business isn't that easy. You might as well use the money for buying jewelry to buy a decent down jacket. The young man stood there awkwardly, looking down at his thin cotton coat. I hardened my heart and turned away without looking back. If I didn't leave then, I really couldn't hold back my tears. Sensing my trembling, Ryan stopped his actions. The moonlight spilled down, and his face gradually overlapped with the image in my memory. Ryan. Perhaps the atmosphere was too gentle. Or perhaps Ryan looked easy to coax when he was drunk. I couldn't help but ask a question that had been buried in my heart for 5 years. 5 years ago, after I broke up with you, you kept standing downstairs and making a phone call. Who were you calling? Ryan was stunned for a moment, seemingly not expecting me to ask this question. Never mind if you don't want to answer. No. The man's deep voice sounded in the room. I was calling the airline, asking how much the cheapest plane ticket to the UK would cost. In the dark, my tears welled up and spilled out. Ryan let go of his hands in a panic and wiped my tears with his sleeve. Enough. This can't go on like this. I stood up and forced myself not to look at him. Since you've sobered up, just leave. Ivy. She's still waiting for you at home. What? Ryan seemed to suddenly understand something, and reached out to pinch my chin. Serena. What are you thinking? Do you really think I would be with someone else? I thought about it. Apart from the sentence Ryan. Why did you come without waiting for me? There really hadn't been any intimate actions between them. It's just that Ryan had never had a female companion by his side before. And Ivy was the first. Coupled with that ambiguous address, it's hard not to make people think. Ryan gritted his teeth angrily. She's Hugh's girlfriend. Hugh was a senior that Ryan met during his senior year of college. He had said he wanted to introduce him to me before. But unfortunately, fortunately, that thing happened before I could meet him. There was a dangerous glint in Ryan's eyes. I was a bit scared and started acting unreasonably. But you bought a necklace for her. Who said it was for her? Ben. She called you Ryan. Ryan rubbed my head. She called me that following Hugh. I'll tell her not to call me that anymore in the future. After thinking about it, he added, neither of them is allowed to call me that anymore. But. I looked at Ryan curiously. If you don't have a girlfriend, what were you doing at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Ryan had an expression as if he was both angry and amused. I went to see if that heartless person had really gotten a divorce. In less than 24 hours. I had already been to the Civil Affairs Bureau twice. It was still the same staff member who handled the procedures yesterday. When he saw me, his eyes widened in surprise. But he still delivered the congratulatory message professionally. Ryan, however, seemed completely unaware and just kept giggling at the red marriage certificate. On the way back, his company called. But Ryan still insisted on driving me to the gate of the villa. After repeatedly explaining the precautions, he rushed to the company. When we were almost at the gate, from a distance, I saw a man and a woman sitting in the courtyard, as if they were waiting for someone. Ivy? At the sound of my voice, Ivy was so startled that she dropped her phone. She frowned and looked at me. What are you doing here? The interrogative tone made me feel uncomfortable. But looking at the handsome young man beside her, I still ignored that discomfort. This should be Hugh. According to Ryan, Hugh had helped him a lot when he first started his business. Something came up at Ryan's company, so he asked me to go home first. Are you waiting for him? It's sunny outside. Come in and wait. Ivy's voice became shrill. Serena. What on earth do you want by constantly pestering Ryan? You're talking as if this is your home. I'm telling you. Even if you wait for Ryan, he'll just tell you to get lost. Ivy's reaction was too intense. Considering Hugh was there, I didn't say anything. But I also lost the intention of inviting them in. I opened the door and went in by myself. Behind me, Ivy was almost shaking with anger. Serena. How do you have Ryan's password? Even a clay figurine has some temper. Even if she was standing up for a friend, Ivy's behavior was going too far. What's more, she couldn't even be considered Ryan's friend. I looked at her coldly. We're married. It's only natural that I have the password to my own home. What's so strange about that? Serena, I urgently need a document. Could you please bring it to the company for me? After sitting down and resting for a while, Ryan called. Ivy left as soon as she heard the news that I was married. The look she gave me before leaving was as if she wanted to eat me alive. This is a villa area on the outskirts of the city, and there's no public transportation at all. I picked up the document and the pass, and randomly chose a car from the garage to drive. The office building of Ryan's family is in the city center. With the pass in hand, I got to Ryan's office smoothly all the way. There is a small reception room at the entrance, and the place where Ryan actually works is still inside. The door was slightly ajar, and Ivy's voice came from the inner room. Ryan? Do you know who I met at home just now? Serena. She seems to be crazy. She actually said that you two are married. I don't know where she got the password to your home from. Ryan's reply was obviously tinged with displeasure. Ivy, watch your words. Also, hadn't also Ryan session. We are indeed married. How could it be? Ryan, you want to take revenge on her, don't you? She abandoned you back then. You must hate her so much. Right? My hand that was about to push the door stopped. I held my breath and quietly waited for his answer. The man's voice was tender and gentle. Why should I hate her? The princess wants to live in a castle. What's wrong with that? The door opened. Ivy's eyes were red. When she left, she even bumped into me hard. Ryan? Ryan was sitting sideways and looking out the window. He only came to his senses when he heard my voice. He stood up and took my hand. When did you arrive? I touched my slightly flushed face and quietly lied. I just arrived not long ago. In the evening. Ryan cooked dinner himself. After all these years, he still remembered all my dietary restrictions and preferences. Looking at his sharply contoured profile under the candlelight, I suddenly felt a bit of a lump in my throat. My phone rang inappositely. Ryan glanced at the screen. His face stiffened for a moment. He quickly looked at me and then casually hung up the phone. The ringtone persisted. After Ryan hung up the phone for the third time, I silently pointed at the table with my finger. That seems to be my phone. Right? Ryan narrowed his eyes and pushed the phone towards me forcefully. He used so much force that it seemed like he was angry. On the screen, the name Leo caught my eye. Under Ryan's gaze that seemed to be ready to eat me alive, I smiled sheepishly and answered the phone. It's really embarrassing to answer a call from an ex-husband in front of the current husband. Leo had attempted suicide. It was Ava's younger brother who sent him to the hospital. After Ava passed away, Zane had always refused to accept Leo's financial support and also didn't allow him to visit their grandmother. But when a large sum of money suddenly appeared in his bank card, he immediately guessed what Leo was going to do. The young man, with red eyes, handed me a PHS phone and asked me to pass it on. This was left by my sister. I thought about it and decided that it should be given to him. Thanks to the timely medical treatment, Leo woke up soon. He took the pink phone with trembling hands. The phone had already lost its signal, and the time was frozen 5 years ago. In the voicemail, the gentle voice of the young girl echoed again through time. Leo, don't be sad. Do you still remember my dream? Now, I'm giving it to you. You must fulfill it for me. Otherwise, I'll be angry. And his dream was to become a public interest lawyer. She was clearly a child who grew up in hardship, but she always thought about lighting a lamp for others. Outside the hospital ward, Ivy was holding an abortion report and pushing Hugh excitedly. Tell me quickly. Hugh hesitated for a long time and finally made up his mind. Ryan. That. Hugh lowered his voice, frowned, and pointed at the hospital bed to indicate. She had an abortion before. I know. Ryan's answer was quick and firm, and his eyes were full of pity. He knew. That day in the gallery, when he heard Serena trembling say the words, "My dead child," he could hardly resist the urge to go up and hug her. Although Serena didn't say it, he could guess that her previous marriage hadn't been very good, but it didn't matter. Those things were all in the past. Now he would stay by Serena's side and shield her from all the storms. Hugh let out a long sigh and recalled the day he first met Shen. His impression of her had changed from a beautiful ambitious woman who deceived my brother's feelings to a lucky woman who had a failed marriage but finally found a good man in my brother. He began to seriously talk about what happened that day. You don't know. When she was brought to the hospital, we were all shocked. She was such a beautiful girl. But almost all the places covered by her claws were injured. Hugh pushed his glasses up and his tone became serious. The person who did it must be very experienced. Those injuries were much more serious than they seemed on the surface. But the surveillance cameras 3 years ago weren't as advanced as they are now. We also don't know who exactly sent her here. Hugh was immersed in the memories and didn't notice that Ryan beside him began to tremble. His eyes were fixed on the ground, and he seemed to have lost his soul. Hugh, having fulfilled land session. You said the last time you saw Serena. When was that? Only then did Hugh come to his senses and notice that Ryan's voice was scarily calm. It wasn't like indifference. It was more like his body could react after his emotions reached the extreme. He could only maintain his rationality with mechanical instinct. Hugh's throat moved slightly, and he repeated it with a dry voice. 3 years ago. Bang. Ryan knew that his hand was bleeding. And it might even be broken. But strangely, he didn't feel any pain. All the blood in his body seemed to have congealed in the same place. After a feeling of near-death suffocation passed, he finally belatedly felt a heart-ernecting pain spreading from his heart. He took out his phone with his bleeding right hand, dialed his secretary's number. And his throat was so tight that he could barely speak. Ryan was mature beyond his years. Except for the time when they broke up, Hugh rarely saw him lose his composure. But now, the man had rolled up his sleeves to his elbows and was smashing the luxury car in front of him with a baseball bat as it venting his anger. The wound on his right hand joint was still oozing blood, scaring the passers-by who happened to pass by to take a detour. Hugh had no choice but to go back and find a savior. Ryan. At the sound of the familiar voice, Ryan's hand that was swinging the baseball bat froze in place. His eyes were so red that it was hard to distinguish the boundaries of his pupils. His girl, wearing a white dress, hugged him and patted his back to soothe him. Under the city lights, the man finally couldn't hold on and knelt down on the ground, sobbing pitifully. He had expected in countless late nights that Serena would be as miserable as he was. And he had searched for the evidence of their love over and over again in the long memories. But when the truth was cruelly revealed, he didn't even dare to think about it. How painful she must have been at that time. Ryan locked himself in the room and refused to come out. I went to the study to look for the key, but accidentally found a medical record. Outside the door, Hugh looked at me guiltily. Serena. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have interfered in your relationship, but there are some things I think you should know. After you left, Ryan worked on projects day and night. During that period, as long as someone was willing to pay, he was willing to do anything. Half a year later, several of our achievements were acquired by the company, and we finally had the startup capital for our business. He accompanied clients to drink glass after glass outside. He didn't leave the table even when he had a gastric hemorrhage. And he finally got the first order. Later, the company gradually started to make a profit. And we also had several new employees. Then he could finally catch his breath a little. Just when I thought everything was on the right track, I realized that Ryan, he was self-harming. Only then did I know that Ryan had been seeing a psychologist. The doctor said that his tendency towards self-destruct was very serious. He felt that he didn't deserve all the beautiful things in the world. The word that appeared most frequently in the medical record was my name. My hurt didn't make him give up loving me. He just stopped loving himself. For a full 5 years. Every night, my young man had been recalling that late night. He remembered every word, every expression I had said over and over again. He kept asking himself what he had done wrong. Hugh left, saying that he was going to deal with the matter with Ivy. Since I appeared, Ivy's behavior had been too abnormal. Anyone could tell that she still liked Ryan. I nodded and watched him leave. At first, I resented Hugh. If it weren't for him, Ryan wouldn't have been so greatly stimulated. But after he told me about Ryan's condition, I was more grateful to him. Love should be about sharing, not deception and concealment. Ryan, I'm hungry. The door that had been tightly closed for a long time opened. Ryan lowered his head and apologized. I'm sorry. From the time we came back from the hospital until now. He didn't know how many times he had said sorry. I hugged him from behind. I leaned my head tightly against his back. When we were still in school. She had liked Ryan and was also full of hostility towards me. Okay. It was obviously a simple sentence. But I could feel the violent heaving of Ryan's chest. How could it not be my fault? There was a choke in Ryan's voice. Serena. I even hated you. I knew. I had seen it in the medical record. He hated me for leaving him and going abroad. He hated that I was clearly a gold digger but still provoked him. A down-and-out young man. He hated that I was out of the loop and didn't come back to find him even though he had already achieved success and fame. But when the doctor asked him how he wanted to take revenge on me, he couldn't say a single word. Hating me all this time. In the end, it was just because I didn't love him. I let go of my hands. Turned Ryan's body around. And beckoned to him. Ryan obediently bent down so that I could see his long and narrow eyes without having to look up. I leaned close to his ear and said word by word. It doesn't matter. I have always loved you. We were both afraid of hurting each other. So we tried our best to hide things. But it backfired. Fortunately, the rest of our lives are long. And we still have a lifetime to love each other well. The end.